Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. Today, I am here with Sara Bennett, who is the triple threat. She's a yoga teacher, a wellness guide, and a future chiropractor. And I always have soft spots in my heart for chiropractors because I think I've shared before my dad was a chiropractor. And so it's definitely influenced and shaped our own family's outlook on health and well-being. So, hi Sarah.
Hey Katie, thanks so much for having me today.
You're welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Settling into a new space in South Carolina.
Yeah, just moved. We were chatting about this before we hopped on. 9 days fresh in Greenville area.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You said you've moved around like quite a bit, though, actually. Seacoast, New Hampshire, which is where we met, but you've also lived in San Francisco, Austin, and now Greenville. Anywhere else?
Yeah, I also lived in Houston, Texas, and I've lived a few different places between Massachusetts, Maine, and New Hampshire. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I know. That's a lot of moving. Um, do you have a favorite area thus far?
well, that's a great question. Well, I really love the Seacoast. That's where I do plan to come back to once I graduate from school. But a second close is the Austin, Texas area. That was also
Mm.
really fun to live down there.
Yeah. I've heard good things about Austin, but I've never been there myself, so I have to check it out sometime.
Yeah, great place to visit.
Awesome. Well, welcome. I'm excited to chit chat with you. So, I always start with the same question, which is just opening it up to your journey in health, wellness, how you landed where you are today in chiropractic school. Fill us in.
Yeah, I would say the simplest way to describe my path is that I've been, for most of my life, asking the question, what makes a healthy human? I think when I was a kid, I grew up kind of seeing a lot of people around me, important people around me, that were not well or were not showing vitality, so to speak, within
Yeah.
their life or their experience. And so a lot of my sort of observation and questioning was around, okay, kind of in one sense, it was a self protection mechanism of how do I prevent this from happening to me? And in another sense, it was like, well, what actually makes us healthy as opposed to just not sick? And so I've explored a lot of different things in effort to answer that question.
Yeah, I have, okay, yoga, Reiki. You Reiki as well?
Yes, Reiki 1.
Nice. Yeah, I think the difference between vibrant health and not sick or ill is something that we could use more differentiating with, especially conventional medicine can often be a low bar for what is quote unquote healthy, but in reality, there's so much more we can do to achieve more vibrant physical health. And it's funny, I'm in a co working space now, and there's a guy here that I like chat frequently with, go on tangents together to distract from our work. And he was just talking about how even, tuning into the food we're eating and how we're feeling and how disconnected we are from our body and the quality of food that we're ingesting when we have a lot of processed food or just tying food to mood and just these subtle indicators that we've become so disconnected from in terms of like how we really feel in our body, our energy levels, our mood, and it's all tied to the choices and behaviors and health behaviors we're choosing. So, yeah, anyways,
Yeah.
exciting stuff. And with your family members, what were some of the like variations of disease or
Well, there was a lot of diabetes, so a lot of
yeah.
heart disease, a lot of bone health struggles, osteoporosis, things like that. Some of which are tied to genetics, some of which are lifestyle. And as I've learned and grown in my own path too. It's very much about what you're exposing your body to. Even like you mentioned, your mood while you eat or the way you approach the activity you're doing. That can all influence how your genes express themselves. And so finding a way to, um, I'm sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
um,
Epigenetics is what I'm thinking of as you're talking, and just the exploration of really all factors and how they influence the expression of our genes. And this is literally what I was talking to that guy about earlier, is just how all of the different, health choices we make impact the expression of our genes, and that there is things that we're genetically predisposed to, but also that's not predetermination, and that we can really influence whether genes turn on or off with our food choices, our stress levels, our sleep, our hydration, our spiritual connection, deeper meaning and purpose, community. Literally everything impacts like our state of being and the environment of our internal landscape and how harmonious it is, right?
right, exactly. Yes. So especially once I did learn epigenetics, like you mentioned, I took it as a form of sort of self-inquiry into how do I support my body, and that's just helped me build a lot of different skills that I now share with a lot of other people too.
Yeah, yeah. Self inquiry is a great word that is such an important tool along our path to health and reconnecting back to our bodies and somatic awareness and interoception and even like emotional awareness and how we're feeling and what we need. All of that is rooted in self inquiry. I love
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so your business name is Living Rhythm, which is in transition right now. And you mentioned, we talked about like before the call, you're doing a membership community, and we can chat about that more later too, which I'm excited for you. But can you tell me a little bit and us a little bit about the your inspiration for the name and the philosophy behind it?
Yeah. So living rhythm is an acknowledgement that we are part of nature, and nature in itself has a rhythm to it. And
Mhm.
so in essence, we are a living rhythm of nature, right, as humans, but so is the world around us. And so I really wanted to bring in an aspect of nature. I get a lot of inspiration and guidance from nature. I think it's one of our best teachers, especially in the realm of wellness. And acknowledging and observing nature can help us to acknowledge and observe ourselves as well. And so the name of the business being Living Rhythm is in particular to help people connect with that. I mean, it's subtle. Most people won't realize that when they first read the name, but over time it'll click. And it's very powerful and meaningful for me as well. So,
Mhm. Yeah. The ways that we can align ourselves with the rhythms of nature and really understand our bodies as like a mirror of that and a complex ecosystem itself.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So, with your more recent journey towards chiropractic, tell us more about what guided you down that path. I'm sure yoga had like some influence and connecting to your body, but tell us more about the journey to chiropractics.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yoga is definitely a part of my life and will always be a part of my life as both a student and a teacher. And I think it's a huge part of why I was able to return to an old dream of becoming a chiropractor. So, when I had first graduated undergrad, almost 15 years ago, I was looking into chiropractic. I ended up graduating, got a job, and wasn't really pleased with what I was up to. Was exploring other options, decided to get a job in a chiropractor's office with the intention of is this where I should go next? Like, let me get into the environment a little more specifically before I launch into school. And so that was when I first was exploring it. I thought I did want to become a chiropractor. I worked for an amazing one in the North Shore, Massachusetts, actually. And unfortunately, life and a relationship took me in a different, distracted direction, as
Mm.
many of us experience in life. And so I got to a point where I literally said to myself and other people, direct quote, like, in another lifetime, I would be a chiropractor, um, which has been a really interesting mindset shift and work personally for my own mindset around, okay, now I am welcoming this back in. So fast forward to a couple years ago, I had landed back in the Seacoast after living in California for a few years. Decided to build my yoga teaching business there, but on the side got a full-time job as well in a chiropractic office as an assistant. I knew I liked the environment. I knew it would be a good place for me and would just help bring some balance into my life. But when I took the job, I had no intention of going back to school. But what evolved over that time was just remembering how much I love the profession, remembering how powerful it is for our wellness, and being connected with an incredible boss and now mentor as well. She really encouraged me and helped me see that it's not too late. You can always start again, which in yoga, begin again is such a pivotal practice that we constantly return to. So it was literally that. It's like, okay, I'm going to begin again. And here I am about to start school. So it's been a long time coming, but chiropractic in itself, I really think the principle of it is that we're removing the interference from our nervous system. Our nervous system is the master system in the body. And by removing interference, we get to experience what our nervous system and our health and our vitality expresses optimally, right?
Mhm.
So that's a lot of people think of chiropractic as just fixing back problems, but the root of it, and if you dig a little deeper, and then in particular the way I'll choose to practice is that it's a whole person approach to wellness. um, I believe everyone would benefit from getting their spines checked, just like they benefit from going to the dentist, just like they benefit from, going to the gym or taking a yoga class. I think it's a vital piece to a holistic wellness lifestyle, and it complements yoga really well. I've experienced that personally. I've seen it in my own students and patients in the offices I've worked at. So I'm really excited to now be stepping into a new role.
Yeah, that's awesome. You sound passionate about it. And it's so wild how our own mentality can be so limiting, where we speak limitations onto ourselves, like maybe in another lifetime. And yeah, just the ways in hindsight when we look back and see these little forms of guidance along our path, like you mentioned with the begin again in yoga, and just this message that is at the forefront of an entire like not entirely different path, but going a different way, and then having this message begin again, and then going back to chiropractics is really cool to reflect on. I always love doing that. When before we got on, for reference, Sara and I were talking about, even with my own winding path to holistic health, it's a lot of funny choices and seemingly, you know, non related choices that somehow weave together something that really makes sense in hindsight, which is always fascinating to me. You had said too that chiropractics interrupts nervous system interference or dysfunction. Can you speak a little more about that? Because I've never heard someone explain it that way. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about how is that the case, and fill me in. And then I'd love to
Yeah,
hear more about your personal whole person approach, all the things. So start with
yeah,
that though.
yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, so it's removing the interference from your nervous system.
Right. Okay,
So
that
if
was
you
it.
think about, have you heard of the word subluxation?
No.
Okay, so it's subluxation in a very simple, literal way. You can think of it like if these are two of your vertebrae and your spine is moving through it, and then one ends up like this, there's
Hmm.
pressure on the nerves trying to come out at that level, and
Right.
that's an interference in your nervous system, right? So
Ah.
the communication between your brain and wherever that nerve exiting your spine at that level is trying to go to, there's interference. There's a broken message, basically.
Ah. Right.
The degree to that brokenness or interference with the message or what that looks like varies person to person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's the idea of an adjustment, which is the manipulation of the bones and the tissue that a chiropractor is doing, to allow the nervous system to communicate without the interference. So an
Mm-hmm.
adjustment, when a chiropractor delivers it, the goal is to remove the interference that's compromising the communication line at that
Mm-hmm.
level of the nervous system. Does that
Yeah.
make more sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And I also always imagine, on just a surface level, the musculoskeletal system, when it's not in alignment, there's so much a cascading effect that can happen when we're not in alignment with our skeletal system and how that can impact, organs and our just everything from like just the way we're walking and our hips being like constantly out of alignment or just all of those things as well. Is that's all part of your broader picture too, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and because your body's really smart, so it makes little compensations to try to relieve the pressure itself on those nerve exits as well, or even on the spinal cord itself in some cases. So like some of the like shifts you'll see in a body's pattern, whether it's through the movement or the way you sit, um, some of those are by design, but it's your body trying to fix it without support. So the chiropractor is kind of like a mechanic. It's going to tune up your
Yeah.
body so that the communication can then flow freely again.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is the alignment. So it's not just all about let's make it straight. That's kind of the byproduct of let's allow communication to flow freely.
Right. Yes, I love that. I'm surprised. I've never heard anyone say that before, but it totally makes sense that your nervous system being housed in there and having, vertebrae like squished sideways and stuff would compromise the integrity of the communication. So, learn something new every day, honey. But you
Yeah.
also had said you really want to focus on a whole person approach. And I remember my mom always telling me that in chiropractic school, my dad had like a lot of nutrition training and a lot of just health and lifestyle training, which is funny because I feel that people always, not always, but there is this stigma in conventional medicine that I've seen of like chiropractors aren't real doctors, even though they have a doctorate. But it is also in my mind, I'm like, well, actually, they probably facilitate optimal health more than a regular doctor and know more about facilitating thriving health in the human body than a regular doctor who's more so educated in pharmacology and applying
Yeah.
a prescription to an ailment. So I'm like,
Right.
stigmas are
Right.
usually worth investigating.
Yes, always,
um,
always. And I think in especially in the case of chiropractic, there's just a lot of misunderstanding about the profession and what's possible for people through chiropractic care as well. I want to
mm,
comment on one other piece of the removal of interference
hmm.
piece that I was speaking to. So underneath that, and this is where I think it really complements my own yoga practice, yoga teaching, and the holistic piece around also relating back to nature. So it's we're removing the interference because there's a trust that your body knows what to do, that there's
Mm,
an intelligent design that your body already has everything it needs, but sometimes things get in the way. And so that's a large part of removing the interference so that the intelligence underneath can thrive the way it already knows how to.
Can get in rhythm with itself, you know?
Exactly.
It's like really, I think that's so true is and I talk about that in my own approach is a lot of times, healing happens organically when we remove obstructions to it because we are an innately intelligent, complex system that has a propensity towards healing. I even think of that in regards to like spiritual evolution and emotional healing. Like we are similar to plants in the fact that like if we provide ourselves a thriving environment in the form of relationships, community, diet, movement, exercise, all of those, a positive, not necessarily positive, but a constructive inner dialogue, and doesn't have to be positive 100% of the time, but having compassion and grace and just the right ingredients, like we will heal and thrive organically. And that's overlap with my own work is just talking about sober curiosity a lot, and sometimes we are using alcohol in ways we don't understand is inhibiting our natural propensity towards growth and healing. And so yeah, it's very similar philosophies of removing obstructions that are interrupting our body, mind, and spirit's natural desire to grow and heal and evolve.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so cool. The body is like really amazing, and I think we've almost like been conditioned to be kind of at war with our bodies, whether it's like our weight or our health, and to not have any kind of trust in what it's truly capable of, and that we're like inherently flawed as opposed to like a divine design that just needs to be supported. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's exactly. I think it's interesting because we're kind of taught from day one, at least in our culture, that like we need all these things outside of us, right?
Mm.
Consumerism. We need all the things to fix us, to make us beautiful, to make us feel good. And it's like, well, actually we have all that. And or we can put ourselves in the right environment rather than just consume, consume, consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that mentality itself, I think, keeps a lot of us spiraling in spaces that are confusing and challenging and never ending because people go. And I had a really amazing episode with this Dr. Cassie Withrich on, she's out of California, but she just talks about how your life is your medicine and you really do have everything you need to heal if you're really willing to like dig in and explore the ways in which you're obstructing that. And so yeah, it really is just um, a lot of times we're sold, the next, she said, she called it sleight of hand, where we're often just given another thing to deal with something, and it's always external to ourselves. And really what we need to heal is the application of that continual mindset that something outside of ourselves is going to fix ourselves, whether it's a relationship or a new diet or material items or some new rigid protocol to follow. It's just really kind of releasing the hold that external fixes have. And when you start to take that level of agency for your healing, like nothing can really fuck with you again because you're like, I can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very empowering.
Totally. So tell me more about how, I know we're weaving together chiropractic, yoga, energy work, all of these different modalities that you are proficient in and learning about. And so, how practices like yoga, breathwork, Reiki, in conjunction with chiropractic, can support our nervous systems and that mind body connection.
Yeah. A part of what I love about it is you can go and get adjusted regularly, but if your lifestyle doesn't shift to support the new patterns, your body won't hold them. And so I
Mm.
see yoga, energy work, breath work as part of that complementary system
Mm.
to also taking some ownership to take care of your body. Yes, going to the chiropractor is taking ownership over that. I don't want to dismiss that at all. And for some of us, it takes a lot to walk in through those doors, and it's great. And your results will amplify if you're also doing some other things between your adjustments. So that's a large part of why I will always teach yoga as well. I see them as complementary. And I also, it's just a sweet spot for me of, I really love to teach. I'll always practice. And I can't envision a life where I don't. So I think it's just going to end up being very complementary for any student or patient that I have in the future. And hopefully inspire some of your listeners as well to take that on for themselves. Um, Whether that's finding a local yoga class or a local chiropractor as well, or even just, getting out and moving your body in other ways that maybe appeal to you better. I do argue that I think there is a form of yoga for everyone. Um, I know not everyone's interested, and if you go try one yoga class and you don't like it, try a different style and or a different teacher is generally what I would recommend to anyone who's curious about yoga, knows that yoga can help you. I mean, that's also a holistic practice, right? Mind, body, spirit, if you let it be. Not all yoga classes are taught that way, but at the heart of yoga, that is what it is. It's a mind, body, spirit support system, sort of like a toolkit for how to almost be the mechanic for yourself, right? I mentioned that analogy with a chiropractor being a mechanic of your spine, but in a sense, it's like tune up yourself through a practice such as yoga.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. The complement between a consistent yoga practice in the interim of having adjustments. And I really love that you pointed that out too, because again, it's like the different levels of agency that we take in our health and our lives. It's great to have a coach. It's great to have a chiropractor or a nutritionist or any of these various practitioners who can help guide you down a path. But there's a lot of like walking the path that needs to happen in between sessions. And that's a disclaimer I always tell clients myself is you will get out of it as much as you put in. It's not just about showing up to sessions, which is great, but it's about the continuity of what you do in between them and how you integrate what you're learning and what we're talking about and the different goals you're setting. Otherwise, you can show up to like a coaching session or a chiropractic, session and without changing anything about your life, and you'll get minimal results, or you can really lean in and take accountability for the change and the consistency in between, and it can be transformational, like next level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many overlaps here, Sarah.
I'm loving that. That's great.
So, yes. So let's talk about within the healing journey. You mentioned that yoga has this mind, body, and spiritual element, with which I've definitely experienced myself with so much. I really love hot yoga. I've been enjoying that, but I recently did yin yoga in the yurt. Somebody else facilitated yin yoga in my little bell tent for sister circles, and that was really nice too. I'm like, I don't know how you can hate on yin yoga. I mean, this is just like peaceful stretching here.
Yeah.
I'm like, this feels good, and we all need to do this more, especially people who have toddlers, because it's just like every stretch I needed was so nice and just like not extensive or challenging, just like really felt so good, opening up, stretching your back and just everything. I loved it. But so I also see the mental piece in terms of just connecting to your body, connecting to your thoughts. There's a lot of times I know practitioners will provide like reflections throughout practices to facilitate like self inquiry and mindset work. And then the spiritual element, tell me about how that shows up for you. And I'd also love to hear more about the spiritual health element in your own healing journey. What's your perspective on that in terms of like whole person health, and how would you explain it to clients?
Yeah. Um, I think our spiritual health is a vital piece to the pie as well. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Those are the four sort of subtle bodies or parts of the body that I like to focus in on. I think if you focus in on all of those, you're doing pretty great. If you're missing one, you're gonna feel it. So part of what I love about yoga, and what drew me to it initially was just in my personal practice. When I started practicing yoga, I had no intention of becoming a teacher. That evolved over time. Um, but there was a point in my life where I was raised a certain religion. I drifted from it and I was kind of
What
searching.
religion?
I was raised Catholic,
Oh,
Roman
yeah.
Catholic. Yeah. It was also kind of confusing in my household. I was raised Catholic. My dad and my sister were Catholic. My mom was Methodist. So they were like we were going to separate churches. When I was really young, I went to church with my mom because the Methodist church is more accepting of children and a better environment for children. So it was like, okay, go here with mom until you start CCD, and then you're over here at the Catholic church now, and everything's different and a little bit stuffy, and like okay, you're getting through it. And I will say I really loved the music component of my mom's church, very different in the Catholic Church. Um, I loved the community aspect, and I was curious about spirituality. I just over time felt like, okay, I don't really believe this. I don't know what I believe. I didn't dismiss religion completely, but I wasn't practicing in any way
Mm-hmm.
once it was my choice. And I got sort of curious about meditation and a few different things when I was probably in like middle school, late middle school, early high school. But I was still very lost and not too much focus on it until actually I was just out of college, or late college and out of college for the first couple of years. And I remember actually this was I was working in the first chiropractic office I ever worked at, and there were some of our patients who were very Christian. I don't remember exactly what denomination, but they were Christian of some sort. And I remember just observing them and thinking to myself, I don't know if I believe what they believe, but I want to believe something the way they believe it. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah,
it's like,
Jesus is a hell of a drug out here.
right? Like I wanted to believe in something the way that it, appeared to
Yeah.
exist in this. And
There's
so
a
that
lot of
sort of
like
was in, sorry?
people real just excited about Christianity. And I can see why, because I think Jesus is a pretty powerful figure, you know. And
Yeah.
I facilitate a relationship with Jesus in my own spiritual practices, but I wouldn't like identify as fully Christian, but I don't really identify as religious in any form, but Christ consciousness, Jesus as a human, like he's lit. I can see why people are excited. They're jazzed up about Jesus, and I get
Right,
it.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And so similarly, at this point in my life, I wouldn't consider myself religious either, but I am a very spiritual person.
Mm,
And yoga is what brought me back to any form of spirituality.
mm,
And I find a lot of that through nature and things like that, which is also another part of why I bring that into my teachings and my business. And as part of a holistic health lifestyle. So, yoga really brought me back to spirituality. Part of what I really connected with was really turning inward more, right? There was more of an emphasis on looking inward, less looking outward, less like depending on some other being, and more agency or ownership. And so I also believe, and I sprinkle that maybe more obviously in my classes now, but when I started, it was much more subtle of bringing spirituality into yoga in public classes.
Mhm.
It's always been a whole person approach for me, mind, body, spirit. Um, and the depth of that spirit piece definitely evolved over time as I've taught for over 10 years now. So um, yeah, but I think it's a very powerful piece. If you read into yoga philosophy, you'll learn more, you'll be able to connect with it more, but it's all if you want to, right? If you don't want to, then that's probably not comfortable and it's not going to be great for you, but allowing yourself to just be more inward focused, if
Mhm.
nothing else, to
Mhm.
then create the space to connect with some spirituality as well. So I
Yeah.
think it is a vital part of our overall health and of a yoga practice.
Yeah. It sounds like to me one big thing that comes up with what you're saying is just presence with ourselves and the ability to self-reflect. And it's interesting, my spirituality has evolved. So like it actually, it's funny because I've done a lot of exploring, but I feel like through my life it's kind of stayed the same, to be honest. Like I went to uh like Christian school when I was little, and it was a Presbyterian Christian school. Not because my family was particularly religious, but because my mom was like, this seems like a nice Christian school, and like the public schools weren't as good. And my mom was always very spiritual, and like she would kind of like dabble in church sometimes and like make us go. And one time she did make us go to a Catholic church, and I was like, what the is this? This ain't my little Christian school where we're like, God, Lord, I lift your name on high. I'm like, this is my Christian school is like happy, and we had like chapel and like jazzed out to like Jesus, and it was like everyone was super like it was a very like welcoming religious experience. And so yeah, the first Catholic church I went to, I was like, this is really serious. And lots of like incantations and stuff. I was like, what's everyone saying at church, Where so it was totally it's like the religious exposure can vary so drastically. But growing up, even within like my religious experience, I remember being like, this is like cool, like you know, I could like fuck with Jesus. Like he seems pretty awesome. This idea of God is like I like this. But I was also very skeptical of like, okay, these Bible stories, are we really taking these as like fact or are these metaphors or symbolism? Like I always had my questions about religion, and then as I grew and like developed my own spiritual practice, there's elements of spirituality that I'm like, okay, this is like throwing out too much of religion, and like what about God and Jesus and surrendering to like co-creation with a divine creator. And so I don't know, maybe I'm like religiality or something. I like some of the religious figures and exploring different world religions, and think that there's a lot of, different unique historical figures and different religious ideologies that have so much significance and are like ultimate spirit guides that we can connect to. But I also think a lot of like religious practices, there's a lot of dogma and manipulation by humans. I'm like, I don't know. Seems like they went a little too far here, whatever. So yeah, I've kind of landed in this space where I really feel like my own spiritual connection of like I like the idea of connecting to like the energy of God and something greater, um, and using it as a force to like invite my highest self. So like not the individualized approach of spirituality, but this more like both God and take agency. And Jesus is cool, and probably so was Buddha, had some good lessons.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The co-creation piece that you mentioned, I really connect with, and also a healthy skepticism, right? Like I believe Jesus existed and was a holy human. Do I
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
he was the son of God? I don't know.
Yeah, and like
But like
I
he was a holy figure. He had a lot
yeah.
of good things to teach us.
Yeah,
So
he
like you
wasn't
said, same with
religious.
Buddha, same with,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah, like he wasn't religious himself. So, yeah, like his teachings were about, Christ, the embodiment of like Christ consciousness. And so it's just really fascinating, like digging in and developing what your own spiritual beliefs are. And I think for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is like how it contributes to overall well being. And like what I've landed on is that my own spiritual beliefs inform me that we are all connected to each other and something greater. And I think when we carry that mindset, then we act in more intentional, healthful ways with more integrity when we realize we're part of a larger whole. And then I also think that like connecting to nature, that's a big part of my spirituality too, and this divine creation of earth and humanity and this like co-creation flow. There is some element of like surrender and flow that I find in my own faith that feels so much more ease filled than trying to go through life on my own. And some kind of trust in like a greater plan doesn't mean I don't take aligned action, but I feel like it's really supportive to a healthy nervous system, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And I think underneath what you're saying there's a level of trust, right?
Yeah.
And I think that for me was probably the most powerful piece. When I wasn't sure, when I was questioning everything, but like didn't have anything to land on.
Mm-hmm.
So like to be clear, I still question a lot of things, but
Yeah.
there's a underlying trust now.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings a groundedness. And I think that shows up in our spirituality and our health and
Yeah.
wellness in a broader sense,
Yeah.
because there's less of the grasping.
And
And
resistance with life. That's like very stressful when you carry that level of energy with you on any length of time.
yeah, yeah.
Totally. The other piece, too, so connection to each other, ourselves, something greater is, for me, connection to meaning and purpose. And I feel like that is like another piece of my spirituality is like, okay, I came here with a purpose and I want to develop what that is and leave the world better than I found it. And I think that for me personally allows me to like live a more inspired life. And yeah, between like living a more creatively inspired life to commit to having more impact and the degree to which faith can soften our nervous system and the degree to which we act from a more community minded space when we see our interconnectedness, like those things sound pretty healthy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And what came up for me while you were sharing that is a question that I ask myself and have as a reminder written actually of um, you know, this is bigger than me. How can I just play my part? Right. Well,
Hmm.
especially when I get kind of in my head or rambly or anxious or um, even just like overly critical of myself. It's like, okay, wait, just back up. All of this is way bigger than me. How do I just play my part? And we can see examples of that in our bodies, in nature, and I think in a way through our spirituality too.
Yeah, totally. It takes the pressure off a little bit and thinking you have to like force your way through life. And instead, you just have to be in alignment with flow to occur. And that's where I think holistic health even comes into play is when we're just caring for our physical vessel. There was a quote that one of my teachers in my holistic health training had said, and it went something like, it was like when you're doing the right things for your body, mind, and spirit, you're in the right place at the right time all the time. And I think it just spoke to the synchronicity and flow we create in our lives when we just focus on our inner landscape, foundational health, our mental, emotional, and spiritual state of being and vibration, and how and it is really like healing yourself has such a ripple impact because you just carry this energy into the world that allows you to come into contact with the best possible manifestations of your life and the best possible outcome. Like you're setting your up setting yourself up for success by like respecting your body and taking agency over all aspects of your well-being. And then from there, like you can trust that your life will unfold as it should because you're in highest alignment with yourself.
Mm.
So, and then that energy ripples into like everyone else and inspires them to be like, oh, if we just take care of our state of being, like a lot is sorted from there. But so many people are so worried about skipping the step of like, what am I going to do here or there? Like, figuring their life out everywhere other than with themselves. It's like, that shit gets sorted, honey. You got to just focus on your internal landscape, and like a lot of the other stuff falls into place.
Right. Yeah. So there's the trust piece, letting it fall into place. And then I think in a really practical way, we can apply that to a yoga practice. So, in my own experience, and many of my students have shared too, you start practicing yoga, and in some practices, especially a more active, potentially you said you like hot yoga, so it's probably a vinyasa practice. So, a
Mm.
more active, strengthening type of practice, more challenging physically in some ways. There's a different challenge in other types of classes, but specifically in a vinyasa class, if you're going and you're, for example, in some ways, you're literally putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, right? Physical shapes in your body that maybe it's challenging for you, maybe it's uncomfortable. Hopefully, it's not painful. If it's painful, back out of it. But the practice itself, if you're in it and you're noticing discomfort, you're training yourself to breathe and stay steady and focus on intention despite that challenge and
Mhm.
despite the discomfort. And I
Mhm.
think in a very practical way, that's just one example, that then mirrors in your day-to-day life. You end up in a difficult conversation, and instead of becoming reactive, you're breathing steady. And so you have a clearer mind and you can respond instead of react. And that's just one example of how a yoga practice can really show up in your day-to-day life in a really subtle way that you probably have no idea of the first time you step on your mat or in a class, unless you've heard this, of course, beforehand. But most students walking into a class that haven't experienced it before, they don't realize. And then slowly it starts to show up and they start noticing, wow, I'm responding differently in certain situations than I used to. And to me, that's really the magic of the practice. We
Yeah.
can practice yoga to do all the fancy poses all we want, but the real magic to me is your life flows better too.
Yeah. So good. And a very wonderful example of how doing the inner work within has this broader ripple effect when you learn how to sit through discomfort and build resiliency and consistency within yourself and um, all of those things. And then we can go out and have more thoughtful, meaningful conversations with people. We're not reactive, and that inspires a different version of them to come to the table as well. And
Mm.
so it's so funny. I always talk, not always, but I've definitely talked about, outreach culture, just things where it's like emotional manipulation of the masses, and how, like, if everyone just focused on doing their inner work and then we all collectively like talked about some of these broader issues, like that's where it starts. But it's so many people like focusing on collective issues without cleaning up their own, side of the street, if you will. And you bring to the table a totally different energy than you do when you've been able to sit with yourself, sit through challenging emotions, stay consistent, show up for yourself, be willing to move through discomfort. Like all of those internal skills heal the collective.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in a more a consistently inward sense too, it also builds the awareness to take better care of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, of course you're gonna react in a challenging situation if you haven't slept well, you haven't eaten, and you're dehydrated. Like,
I
you know,
literally just had this chat with my client. I'm like, if your basic needs aren't met, then like that's when the threshold lowers and like we give into cravings or we give into behaviors that we don't want to. But it's like we're so tuned, like our society specifically is just so go 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 and forget all of these basic things like I won't eat, or I sleep like shit, or I'm scrolling for 3 hours before bed, or it's like what? How do you expect like you're gonna behave when that's like the baseline of treatment that you're providing yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
Teaches you to tune in earlier and start paying attention to, like, I always use the gas tank example. Like you're tuning in when your gas tank is like half empty instead of like bone fucking dry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like we're also people, creatures of habit, right? So there's often patterns you can pick up on, and then you just set those habits in your regular lifestyle, your daily rhythms.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's sort of like a little buffer, a little guardrails. You've taken care of yourself so that you can show up as your best self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amazing. Love it.
Mhm.
Yes, preach. I'm like, well, we went off of our outline a little bit, but I like talking about Jesus and our inner landscape and healing, the ripple of healing. I told you, I'm like, this is a loose outline. You
All
like
good.
didn't know we were gonna go deep into the spiritual lens, but I always weasel my way in that direction on these podcasts.
No worries, I'm here for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. So tell me whether it's in chiropractics or just whole person healing, what you've seen in your yoga teacher experience, some of the most common like challenges, obstacles that people face on their path to healing, self-discovery. What do you think are some universal and relatable obstacles that people may come up against that could be nice and validating for people listening to hear?
Yeah. I think the biggest ones that pop into my head first are that it's not linear and it's going to take some time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the nature of our culture, we think everything should be fixed like that. I did the thing this morning, why don't I feel better? Right? Like,
Yeah.
or like I felt better yesterday, why don't I feel better today?
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna take time. Through the lens of chiropractic, I think one of the biggest reminders is your body has been in a pattern for how long? Maybe years, maybe decades. It's going to take some time to unwind that pattern. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that can apply to behaviors as well, to mindsets as well. It's all a pattern, it's all a habit, whether it's a physical position or it's a lens that we look through to see the world with a certain perspective. So I think the path of healing is really important to remember that it's going to take some time and it's never linear. At least I haven't found that to be true for anyone yet.
Yeah.
And by that, what do I mean is like things could be going great. You could feel like you improved, and then you get triggered and you feel like you're right back to where you were before you started doing all that work or at some other stepstone along the way. And that can feel really discouraging. Um, and it's important to remember that's part of the process. So I can speak to that from a literal personal example that I've just experienced in the last couple weeks.
Lay it on
I'm
us.
pretty damn good at taking care of myself at this point in my life. I know what I need. I eat well. I drink water. I sleep well. And I just moved from New Hampshire to South Carolina. And moving in itself, I mentioned earlier, I moved a lot in my life. Some of those were very stressful, sort of big personal crisis level of moves, especially the more recent ones before the, well, 2 moves ago. Um, so I put a lot of work into healing from that, resolving the sort of like trigger of a move being a stressful crisis, scary event.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this move was 100% exciting. It's completely my choice. I'm stepping into an aligned profession, and a life that I've dreamed of. I know it's what I should be doing. I'm excited for it. I still had moments of literal terror, um, of forgetting to eat, and then realizing at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, like, why am I so grouchy? Oh, I hadn't stopped to eat, like, and that's not every day, but that happened a few times, and those are like old patterns, old responses
Mm.
to this kind of thing being a stressful, scary event, as
Hmm.
opposed to moving through it with fun. So sharing that just as an example of a part of me
Regression.
wanted to say, I healed from this. This shouldn't be happening to me. I should be taking better care of myself. I have the toolkit. I know what to do.
Hmm.
But we're human and things happen and our body remembers, um, even when our mind logically has moved forward. And so things can come up. So that's an important one to remember as well, that it's not linear. And maybe just if it happens to you to lean into the power of, okay, but now I do have more skills. I do have more awareness and knowledge, and I can approach it this time a little differently if you do notice like something like that coming up again.
Mm.
Um,
That's great.
Another couple obstacles I think people run into, and I think this especially applies to women. I've taken a couple, I've taken one cycle guide certification, and I've done a lot of reading around women's hormones, our personal cycles, and what that looks like and how that changes throughout our lives. So, for example, a woman in her cycling years, you're essentially a different person each week if you take it as a very like kind of straightforward 4 week cycle.
Each week of your cycle.
Right. So each
Right.
week.
I'm like, each week of all cycling years, that's a lot of people. No, but I knew you meant the different phases of our cycle.
Right. So each of the 4 phases you can think of as, they're not exactly, but roughly 1 week at a time. And you're basically a different person in each one of those weeks. Well,
Hmm.
what does that mean for someone on a healing journey and practicing yoga, for example? That means the practice that helped you last week might feel like shit this week, or vice
Hmm.
versa, right? Like your needs are changing. And so, on a broader context, not just for women, but people in general, over time, your needs change.
Yeah.
And so drilling in the one thing that was supposed to work or used to work or worked one time, I think is a slippery slope, to not realize that you're building a toolbox for a wellness lifestyle so that you can pull out the tool that works in that situation, not apply the same tool to every situation. Um, so I think
Mm.
that's a really important one too, that your needs will change. And so part of the healing process is being adaptable and building a toolkit to draw from what's going to support you in that moment.
Yes. 100%. When I try to like boil down healing to one concept, I really think that it is self-inquiry and kind of remaining malleable with it and understanding like exactly what you said. If you're willing to be introspective and ask like, what do I need now, what about now, and not expecting it to always be the same, like tuning interoception and tuning into the needs of your body through the different days, weeks, seasons of life, ages, that's like one of the best assets you can have. Because do you, oh my God, health coaching, like the amount of times I've heard people be like, before kids, like I was this, and like, or I used to be able to do this exercise. I'm like, oh my God, but it is like beating your head against the wall when you're constantly comparing yourself to a past season or a different version. And it's like, okay, but your body is a complex system that is always having like a multitude of like inputs and experiences and environments and emotions and food and nutrients and feelings and all the things, interactions. And so you have to become adept at the skill of tuning in to what do I need now from a moment to moment
Mhm.
basis. And when you can do that, that's like pretty awesome because I think a lot of our, programming is, like you said earlier, tuning outward for external fixes instead of looking inward for what do I need now, and like a distrust in the innate intelligence of our body, and a culture that kind of programs us to be on autopilot instead of in a state of attunement and awareness and presence.
Mm.
So we got a lot of things acting against us, but I think you just laid down some very good sacred wisdom. So, simple or accessible ways someone can begin reconnecting with their body and inner guidance.
Yes, that's very much what I focus on. And so I think the first place to start is bringing more awareness to how you breathe.
Mm.
This one's really powerful and super interesting to me because it's one of the only processes in your body that happens on both a conscious and subconscious level. Right? So we're breathing all day. We don't have to think about it at all, but we can, and we can change it, and we can manipulate it or regulate it in different ways that we know or can learn have different impacts on our body. And so, before you get into all of that, I think one of the most important or one of the most simple and accessible ways to start building some self inquiry and build some health habits would be just to check in with how you're breathing. So, the more you can notice that or try to catch how you're breathing before you try to change it, is going to give you good information about your nervous system and the sort of state that you're moving through the world.
Mm.
Um, and then from there, you can start to do other things to support yourself. But the first step, I think, is really just to bring more awareness to how you breathe.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so that's the access point, I think.
Awesome. Have you read Breathe by James Nestor?
I have read parts of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a good one because I think it really just, in short, highlights how impactful our breath is, and just, yeah, it's really the simplest building blocks of health that we seriously underestimate. And
Mm.
it is. It's really cool. He does, I think he was a journalist, but he kind of went down the rabbit hole with like breath work and exploring all the different techniques. And he was, I think he participated in some kind of like study, and just, it was really fascinating to see like the depths. I read it when I was doing my breath work and meditation certification, and like, all right, this is truly like an impactful area. And like you said, you can get a lot of insight if you're noticing you're constantly in a shallow state of breathing, or, yeah, stuff like that. Posture too, which,
Mm.
as I'm like slouching at the computer.
Right. Breath checks, posture checks. Those are probably, and I literally will like put up post-its in random like visible places in my home or in my car to kind of help build that habit. I've done that in the past and returned to it several times to support the habit. Um,
Hmm.
but whenever I do like a concentrated focus on it, even if it's for like a day or 2 days, how many times can you just notice your breath and what you're doing with it, and whether it's choppy or smooth or like you said, shallow or deep, or is it in your chest or is it in your belly? Are you holding your breath? Are you taking big inhales but quick exhales, or vice versa? So like all of that is information um, to then
I feel
support
like I
yourself.
hold my breath a lot. Like,
Mm,
I feel like now that you say that, I'm like, I definitely do that. Where if I'm like super focused, like, am I breathing?
yeah, yeah,
Am
I
I
can relate.
suffocating myself right now? Just like pass out on the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, super insightful. Start small and build too is like always mine. I think a lot of people undergo, their approach to whether it's like health or healing. And it's like they want to do everything at once, and they're like in the zone. And sorry, breathing. I yawned. What does that mean? No, I'm just kidding. What is that telling me about my workload today? But yeah, it's people get very overzealous and then it feels overwhelming. And I even did that a lot when I first started learning about holistic health and everything, when like, oh my God, like my cookware is toxic and I need to transition all my products and like this, that, and the other thing. And just like now, it's funny because like most of my stuff is healthy or non toxic, not all of it, but it just like slowly happened over time and it just does become like a lifestyle shift. And same thing with sobriety. Like it felt really overwhelming at first, but and like now I can't even imagine drinking anymore. And just like, I don't even, it's like a neutral thing in my mind. If I'm around people drinking or not drinking, it's like insignificant. Whereas, like, when I first stopped thinking to stop thinking, stop drinking, when I decided to stop thinking, when I first stopped drinking, the idea of like it being a completely neutral substance in my life and like having zero desire would have been unbelievable for me to like conceptualize at that time. And I think that broadly applies to healing and transformation and working on your health and wellness and all of that. Is that, and even what you said earlier about your own limited thinking, like we really are capable of so much. It's just about giving ourselves the time to achieve it through consistent aligned daily action and self-love. And we do like create new realities for ourselves and just like not allowing the limitations of your current self to restrict who you can become, and just having that faith that through consistent effort like you will shift into a new, totally new state of being and person. And it's possible because anyone who knows me 6 years ago would agree.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the underline there is on the simple and sustainable parts of it,
Hmm.
right? I think
Totally.
that's the tough part when we get excited and want to do all the things and like maybe we do. Oh my gosh, those 30-day challenges used to be so popular. Like I did a lot of the nutritional ones around Whole
Yeah.
30 or keto and whatnot. And you can drill anything for 30 days, maybe, assuming nothing in your life goes sideways during those 30 days, because then you'll just restart next month. But you know, allowing it to be sustainable is really the key factor in building the
Hmm.
lifestyle to then support your overall wellness. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to, yeah, underline those pieces of
Simple. Keep
simple
it
and
simple.
sustainable. And like sometimes it has to be so simple it seems silly, right? But build the habit. Just start there and then let it
Yeah.
build into another habit and that.
Love it. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so delightful and enjoyable chatting. And before we do hop off, I wanted you to just highlight where people can connect with you, learn more, follow along for your offerings and work.
Yeah, thank you. So, all my work right now is online. You can find most of that on my website at livingrhythmwellness.podia.com. I have an online membership focused on yoga and wellness to help you build a home yoga practice, build and sustain a home yoga practice. So, that is actually launching this week.
Nice.
And otherwise, just reach out to me on Instagram at I am living rhythm.
Amazing. Wishing you all the best of luck in your academic endeavors. I know when I finished my master's, I was like, I'm never going to school again. But I'm kind of like feeling the itch now. Like it's been a few years. I could do some school. But yes, wishing you the best of luck. Thanks for chatting and sharing your wisdom. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Like, share, and subscribe if this episode resonated with you. And until next time, I love you. Keep growing. You got this.
Thanks, Katie.